Hi, and welcome to Miracles from the Hill podcast, where we share raw stories that display the anatomy of God's grace here at Miracle Hill Ministries. If this is your first time joining us, please subscribe. And of course, you can like, comment, and leave a review. To connect with us, visit our website linked in the description box. And now, here is our host, Ryan Dirk.
Greetings, listeners, and Merry Christmas here at Miracle Hill. Man, we are here for a bonus episode. We are in between seasons, Jacob. We are just finishing up season 3, which is all about the experience of homelessness for children. And we're going into the Christmas season at Miracle Hill. And then we're going to come out of it. Man, the beginning of the year is going to be hot here on this podcast. We're doing a whole series on addiction. We're going really deep, man, spiritually, physically, emotionally about, what is such a common experience for so many of our guests. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What are we here to talk about?
We're here to talk about Christmas at Miracle Hill.
Y'all don't know this, but Jacob is a Christmas fanatic. But before we get into your fanaticism, man, thank you, listeners, for joining us, for listening to this podcast. Please let us know what you think. Send us an email at podcast@miraclehill.org. Leave a comment, a review. Call us. Call Jacob. Tell him what you think about.
I'd love to talk to you.
Yes, he would. Okay, so we're going to jump in and we're going to spend this whole episode talking about what does the Christmas season look like across our ministry. So, I said Jacob's a fanatic. When did you start listening to Christmas music? Like, when's your cutoff?
I'm already feeling judged by the audience, but I can start listening to Christmas music in like August, September. Not even kidding. See, if you could see his eyes drop when I said that. You know what's weird? There's a psychology to that too. Like I don't know if it's how I was raised or the fact that it was such a warm season. Anyway, I love Christmas. He was not understating that.
No, we have the day after Thanksgiving rule for the tree and music.
And I support your decision to do that.
And we support each other.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay. All right, so let's jump in. So I'm going to interview Jacob. Jacob is the expert today on Christmas across Miracle Hill, and I will add some commentary at times.
Okay.
All right, are you ready, sir?
I think I'm ready, man. I'm excited about this. By the way, he was playing It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year when I walked in here to do this, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, and so you guys don't know this, but it's June is when we're recording this, and we're listening to Christmas music.
So now I'm listening to it starting June this year.
Okay. Man, what does Christmas look like at Miracle Hill Ministries, Jacob, specifically for our guests? What changes during the holidays?
Yeah, so a lot of things change during the holidays. I don't think anybody wants to be in one of our missions or necessarily a foster home at Christmas time. Not that it's not a great place to be, but I think people want to be with their family, with their loved ones. And so it's naturally probably a harder time. No, undoubtedly, it's a harder time during the Christmas and holiday season. But we do lots of things to make it hopefully feel like home. There are several different things that will take place during the holiday season.
Yeah, I think that you should put an exclamation point on that idea. Like, this is the most challenging time of the year for our guests because they're alone or they're away from who they perceive as their loved ones. It's got the highest rated depression in the world, not just in rescue missions.
Yeah.
During the holiday season. So what are those special events that you have for guests?
Well, they look like different things. They're going to vary, some from facility to facility. But, one of the big things that we do is we kind of pull out all the stops for meals around Thanksgiving and Christmas. So if you're listening to this just after Thanksgiving, we just did our turkey fry. And so the turkey fry is this huge event that we do every year where we fry over 600 turkeys. We fry and smoke over 600 turkeys. And we don't use all those inside of just the Miracle Hill facilities. We share those across the community. There's some churches that reach out to us, different agencies that we work with to distribute that meat. But we also do sides and stuff. And so a lot of that Thanksgiving meal preparation is happening during the turkey fry. It's this huge community affair. I love that event. I joke with the team that you're going to smell like turkey from November all the way through Christmas, but it's just a really cool way to get together. So the guests in our care, all of them, including foster families, have access to those turkeys and stuff that we fry that day, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. So we do big meals around the holiday season. We even encourage people, maybe you can speak a little bit more to this, but we even encourage people to invite some guests of their own around the turkey fry, around the Thanksgiving meals, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have specific Thanksgiving meals and Christmas meals in the facilities. Every facility kind of chooses when they do those. There's a lot the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And over the past couple of years, we've kind of treated that as kind of a one table thing. So we'll put up hundreds of chairs, and we'll have the guests invite their family and friends and community partners, and we will all sit around the same table. We do the same thing at Christmas, where we're signing a lot of passes so people can go spend time with their family, but inviting the families into the facilities as well.
So I just imagine that for a second, though, before we move on from that. Like, imagine that you're a guest in our care and that you have no place to call home of your own. Miracle Hill Rescue Mission is your home, right? Like, that's what we want people to experience when they come in there, that they are no longer experiencing homelessness. That is their home. So to have a place, albeit it's kind of a different setting than maybe your normal family gathering, but a place where you could say, hey, Mom, you want to come and join me for Thanksgiving this year? I don't know. How does that feel for a guest in care to do that?
I think it probably feels both ways. It feels really good to have an event or something special. And it's also probably a reminder of loss and brokenness. So it's a challenge all the way around, but a huge benefit at the same time.
Yeah. So that's just part of it. I think a lot of it does revolve around those meals, share food, but we also have special events for our guests, and that's gonna vary too from facility to facility, from county to county. That we have programs in, but we have different churches who will come in and do things occasionally, like handbell choir will come in and do a service at the Greenville Rescue Mission, or a church might come and do a Christmas service or a pre-Christmas service out at the Spartanburg Rescue Mission. There are worship nights that go on. I can think of a couple of churches who even at Easter they come in and they have worship services with our guests, which is really cool to just show up on a Friday night and have a cookout and a worship service with our guests. So there are special events that pop up like that. But there's a lot of people coming in to serve meals too around the Christmas season.
So do they all get a wooden shoe by their bunk on Christmas morning filled with goodies, or do they get presents? Or is it that's just not a thing that we do?
Yeah, what culture was that you were just referring
Dutch.
to? You threw me there for a second. The wooden shoe. I was wondering where he was going with that. We don't do wooden shoes at Miracle Hill. Although we can take some clogs if you had some good ones. So yes, our guests do get presents, but we really try to be not toxic in how we do it, and you're really big on that. You could probably talk more about it, is toxic charity, the concept. I know you've done podcasts about that concept as well. So the way that we do it is the adult guests in our care, they do all receive something very similar. So whether it's Shepherd's Gate, which is our women's and children's facility in Greenville, or the Spartanburg Rescue Mission, they're going to receive very, very similar things. It may be things like razors or shaving cream or practical things, but there are lists that we put out every year. You can go to our holiday needs list and check that out, and you can actually see all the different listed items. But it does vary a little bit. Now, while it's 99% the same. I'll give you an example. The women at Shepherd's Gate, they're going to work, right? So they're maybe stopping at the bus stop, and so maybe they have umbrellas. Whereas the ladies in our renewal program, they're with us for 7 months, and they don't work during that time period until they go to transition, and so they don't necessarily need an umbrella to wait at the bus stop with. So if we have an umbrella for Shepherd's Gate, we might not have it for renewal, but we try to keep the lists all pretty similar so that it kind of does away with some of the disparity. And when you got 600 plus people in care, you want to make sure that we try to be as fair as possible too.
Yeah, we want to be fair. We want to be consistent. We want to provide for their needs, not necessarily their wants, although they all will have something, somewhere in the Christmas week where they'll get a present. We'll probably have, 10 different things in it that they desire or need in their life. So we compile those lists, the staff do. Mm-hmm. We put it on our holiday needs on our website, which will often link to like Amazon, where they can order things. Like if a partner wants to come alongside and buy the razors or buy the combs or the umbrellas or whatever.
Yeah, sure. And we've started doing that. That was kind of a byproduct of COVID, is this use of Amazon needs lists. But it was a way for us to make it easier for people to get the supplies to our facilities. And so but also on that holiday needs page, there's contact information for the different individuals who like I said, we try to keep it consistent, but we do have different individuals at the facilities who are kind of overseeing the count for that facility.
Right. So certainly from a Toxic Charity perspective, we want to fill needs for our adults. What about the kids? What about kids in shelter? What about kids in foster care?
Yeah. Those are kind of two different categories, the way that we look at them. But so kids in our shelters, what we do allow adults to do. In fact, we allow the adults in like Overcomers and Renewal to do this as well. So like if you're a father and you're staying at Overcomers, and you're focusing on getting your life back together and you're running to Jesus and but you're not there with your kids, right? We actually, obviously they'll get to see their kids throughout the holiday season, hopefully. But they actually can put together some of the needs that they would like to give to their kids as well. A wish list of sorts, and then our staff goes out and tries to supply those needs. We don't guarantee that we can get everything on their wish list. But the same with the children in our care. I think sometimes when people think about how Miracle Hill serves kids, it's one of two things. They know about one program and not the other, but I don't know if they think about both. So you may think, the primary way we serve children is through foster care, which is true. That's where we serve the most children, is through foster care. Close to 400 kids a year, and that's teens and sibling groups. They come through our care at Miracle Hill, through our foster care program and up at the foster care community. But it's not just them. It's the other children, like you mentioned, that are in our rescue missions. So it may be a mother who has, 2 daughters at Shepherd's Gate, or a young son at Shepherd's Gate, or they also have the opportunity to compose a wish list for their kids too. And we want them to have the ability to give their children something for Christmas as well.
Yeah, so we get so many unsolicited, unasked for blessings throughout the Christmas holiday, right? Like, so from November forward, people are just dropping off gifts and all those things. And we're grateful for that, and that's awesome. But basically what we're saying is, man, we've got lists. Like, we can help you channel that energy directly into the needs for the kids that we have in our care, which is preferable for the parents.
Yeah, I think it's definitely preferable. I will say, with a lot of those unsolicited gifts that we get, and when we say unsolicited, we mean we're just not asking for them, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're just coming in the front door. And y'all, this place looks like Santa's workshop up in here.
Yep.
On,
Praise the Lord.
Even 5 days before Christmas, there's just stuff flowing, and you're like, how are we going to get this even to kids if we wanted to right now? So we actually we'll kind of cherry pick that stuff that comes in too, to see if there's anything that has come in that fits the bill for those wish lists as well.
Right.
But it's certainly easier for us if we can go out and buy the things that they've specifically asked for. Can I mention somebody before we
you can do whatever you'd like, sir.
So I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Lenora Brooks. So Lenora has been an incredible friend of the ministry for decades, and she, up at the children's home many years ago, used to bring gifts for the kids up there. And she would kind of do her own private fundraising and go around and get her friends to help buy gifts. And a couple of years ago, when we transitioned our children's home, we had a conversation with her, and we let her know that, nearly all of our kids are in foster care now. Even the ones up at the foster care community are technically in foster care, right? Even though they live in the cottages up there. And so Lenora kind of had to transition that fund that she had to be able to help support Christmas gifts for children up there, and we use it for something different now. And I just want to say thanks to her. If we didn't shout her out, that'd be a disappointment. And I've even heard stories about her going to the Haywood Mall 20 years ago, and she would dress as an angel and ask people to. Have you heard that?
No.
Yep, straight up. She would just go up down there and she would dress up and stand out there in the mall and ask people to help contribute. So thank you to Lenora for doing that in the past. And she knows now, but it has changed. And so we don't solicit those gifts any longer. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So you asked about foster care too. So let's talk about kids in foster care. So it's a little complex, but children in our foster care program, we're a child placing agency, but they're technically, a foster family still licensed through DSS, right? So DSS also has a care coordinator who works alongside Miracle Hill's care coordinator. And I don't know if they would call them a care coordinator with DSS, but they have a person who also is kind of checking in, tending to that child. Well, DSS, depending on what county a child is out of. So if that child comes out of Spartanburg County or easily, if they're from Pickens County, let's say they're from Pickens County. Those different counties sometimes have different programs where the DSS is soliciting gifts already for those children.
Sure.
Not only that, our whole goal of foster care is to put children in what?
Stable homes.
Stable homes. So praise God, the children that we have in foster care now are in a stable home. And generally, those parents have some capacity to provide Christmas gifts for those children. But DSS is also helping provide Christmas gifts for those children. So when people call us and they say, hey, I've got a bunch of gifts, now we try not to say no to anything. Right? Like we want to accept it because we know the Lord can use it, and we want to be good stewards of your gifts as well. But that's why we're not going out knocking on your door saying, hey, can you give us gifts? Because those children already kind of have gifts provided a couple of ways. And then we also do a pop-up Christmas shop for our foster families. And that usually happens a couple of weeks before Christmas, where if someone needs assistance, if a foster parent needs assistance, they can actually come in to one of our big training rooms here at the administrative offices and shop a lot of those gifts that have come in unsolicited, right?
Yeah, and there's an angle to this that I didn't think about until a couple of years ago. So, some of our foster families do have means. Probably the majority of them are just regular old families. They're not super wealthy. They're just people who feel called to step into the space of foster care. And so a scenario that I had never thought of was all these gifts come in for the foster child, and their real children, their birth children, bio kids don't have as many gifts.
Yeah.
And so that creates a tension in that family where the foster child has this big giant pile of gifts and the bio children have this reasonable sized pile. And so the foster parents are trying to balance that as well, right? Like they want to make sure that the gifts that all the kids have to open on Christmas morning are equitable, right? Like that nobody's got more than the other kid. And who's the best person to make that decision? It's the foster parent.
Yeah.
Right? Like sure. They need to decide what's best for their family.
Yeah, and that's a real thing. We walk through that, because our son, before we adopted him, he was in foster care for 3-4 years, and he would get blown up at Christmas time, and you feel like you're like, how do I mitigate this? Or do I need to go buy one more gift for my other children? And we don't want to create that. But certainly the foster parent's the one who needs to make that decision and figure out how to distribute that. But yeah, that's a challenge. And if you think about it, and this is not the topic of today, but that resentment that you talked about, you certainly don't want to breed resentment in your bio children, right?
Right.
So if you have a 6-year-old bio child and an 8-year-old foster child in your home, that 6-year-old's watching, right? And they're not necessarily spiritually, physically mature. Like I have many sons at my house, right?
Lots of kids.
By the time this podcast drops, I have 5 sons, right? Like they fight all the time. They don't need one more thing to fight over. But you don't want your child to be resentful of a foster child in your home, and it's already shaking them up. Yeah. I remember when we first started fostering, my other sons, you would have thought that we had, like a bomb had gone off in the house. They started their behavior changed, and then you're grieving that their behaviors change again. Like, you just gotta be careful. I mean, that's a great point that you brought up, but that's why we want to be good stewards of those gifts too, here at Miracle Hill.
And the gifts are the foster parents and the foster children, right? Like, that's what we got to steward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So moving away from gifts, how do the different facilities celebrate?
Yeah. So the different facilities are, as you just said, different facilities. We have some non-negotiable Miracle Hill culture things, right? Like our core values and our mission statement. And our hope is that if anyone were to come into a Miracle Hill facility, that their experience will be pretty similar across the board, right? But you also have a little bit of flavor, right? Oh man, I should have worked that into the turkey fry thing earlier just for a good pun. But each facility, in each of our stores too, we have 8 thrift stores. In fact, I'll go ahead and plug it right here. We need you to volunteer in our thrift stores around the holiday season. So if you are looking for ways to volunteer, don't leave them out when you go to look at our volunteer needs. But each facility is going to be a little different, probably. So I'm thinking about some of the directors at some of the facilities. Venus over at Renewal, who's been there for a long time. Venus is going to have some things that they do, some traditions and things that they do aside from maybe just the regular meals and things like that. Roy is going to have some different things out at the Spartanburg Rescue Mission, or Andy up in Cherokee. They're all going to have some different things, and some different churches and stuff that want to come in and do things with them. And if you are one of those, we would just encourage you, one, to reach out to our volunteer administrator. His name's Caleb. And we'll put his contact information on the screen. But if you're listening, it's cmassey@miraclehill.org. But if you reach out to him and your church wants to do something, he'll connect you with the right person. But they all have a little bit of a different flavor, right? Like maybe like each of our homes even have a little bit of a different flavor around the Christmas season. Like me listening to music in September, and you waiting till December 1st.
Okay, so we already kind of touched on this, but is the season more difficult for guests?
Yeah, we did touch on it. It's 100% unequivocally more difficult for our guests. And if I may, I'll dive a little deeper into that. I've done a podcast with you before talking about our experience with foster care. My son, who is now 10 years old, the one who we adopted after we fostered through Miracle Hill. I remember there was a time when he was 8 years old, and we've had him since he was just turned 3, right? When he was 8 years old, he came downstairs one night, and we had put all the kids to bed, and I was laying on the couch, and he was just bawling his eyes out, weeping. And I said, "What's wrong, buddy? What's wrong?" And he couldn't articulate it. You know when kids crying and they're just, you can barely get the words out. And I said, calm down, what's wrong? And he said, "They took me away from him. And I said, "Who did they take you away from?" I thought he was dreaming, and I realized he wasn't. He was rehashing this memory in his head of when he came into care. DSS clearly they didn't have any other way to house the kids, so they split all the kids up. He was actually crying that they had taken him away from his older brother, who's 2 years older than him, 5 years after he had come into foster care. And that was sobering for me, because I remember thinking, how can this kid be carrying this much trauma 5 years later? And so to answer your question, boy, we hugged, man. And he loves all of his adopted brothers now, right? Like, he loves them. And in fact, he went on a trip the other day, and he just cried when they left. He said, "Daddy, I wish you were going with me. I didn't get to go with him." I know he loves us, but he still hurts. The thought of not being with a bio sibling or a bio parent, it is painful, whether or not someone has no family or they just can't be with their family, or even if you're in one of our programs and you have caused it, right? Like, because you're the wayward son, like you have chosen whatever path of destruction over being with your family. It still hurts, right? I would imagine it still hurts. And so, think about our guests. Pray for our guests. Love on our guests as you're able.
Yeah, let me add to that too. So my wife and I have been married for 12 years. And I think it took her about the first 6 years of marriage to grasp the idea that Miracle Hill never shuts down, right? Like, we're open 365 days a year. Doesn't matter if it's snowing or it's a holiday, right? So is Miracle Hill still operating on Christmas Day? 100% yes, right? Has to. And taking it a step further, of all the days that we have counselors in our facilities, what day is the most important day to have counselors there? It's Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Right? It's to field all that trauma and brokenness and depression and sadness that is very real on a Christmas morning. Oftentimes, our guests are just trying to get past the day.
Yeah.
Right? Like get distracted from the day, which means the risk for relapse from addiction is higher. The risk for just leaving and going to a hotel for the night is higher. So, man, that is maybe the most important day that we have coverage of the entire year. So every Christmas, we have staff who are there in the facilities instead of home with their families.
You know what really was a sobering moment for me in regards to that is when COVID hit and they shut down dorms, right? College dorms. They shut down residential. The hotel industry was shuttered. Miracle Hill couldn't change. And that's what, there is no place for them to go, right? And so we are a hospitality mixed with, I don't know, it's truly rescue
Hospital.
work. Yeah. Oh, that's good. We should coin that new tagline coming soon. Hospitality mixed with hospital. I don't know. I don't like it anymore. But no, what made me think of that, Ryan, was like, as people were all going home, they're saying, go to your homes. And folks in rescue missions all across the country, all across the world, they couldn't go home. And so we had to staff it then as well, right? And so we had fearless people who were standing in the gap to go love on people. And we need fearless people today on Christmas Day. And so while you're opening gifts on Christmas morning, remember that there's a counselor, there's a staff member who is counseling people and loving on them on Christmas morning. And so, like I said, pray for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and let me also point to some of our heroes, that being our faithful volunteers who, there's some groups that like serve every Christmas morning.
Or every Thanksgiving day. Yeah.
That are there instead of being with their family.
It's like their family tradition.
Yeah. So talk about that. What about volunteers, volunteer groups, donation drives? Like, what does that look like during Christmas?
Yeah, that's a great point. So Christmas, as you would expect, is this flux for us of people starting to think about, oh, there's people in need. And not that people don't think about it year round, but they don't think about it the same way. Usually sometime after August or September, people start going, hey, they start thinking about feeding people and caring for people and clothing them in the winter weather, even though it's still like 70 here in December, right? But one of the biggest needs we have, the biggest need we have as far as drives go, is food drives. We need food, and we not only need food through like December, January, we need food year round. And so don't just be thinking, hey, I'd like to do a food drive. If you can do a food drive for Miracle Hill in mid-April or May, God bless you. That is amazing, because that's when the pantries start to get low. But we need food drives, and you can actually go to miraclehill.org/donation-drive-form. Again, that's miraclehill.org.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Donation.drive.form. I got to say it anyway. He's going to put it in the show notes for you. But we can, we really need donation drives. Now, I'll caution people a little bit. I say caution, that's not the right word. We don't ever want to get in the habit of saying no to your gifts. If you bring something to Miracle Hill, we want to receive it. Sometimes if you inundate us with so many coats, I say a lot of churches think coats, or a lot of businesses may think coats. Well, by the time Christmas gets here or the winter season gets here, we may have so many coats that we have to kind of make the decision, whether or not we can use them or if we have to sell them in thrift. And when people come in, they want to bring stuff for our shelters. We honor that. And so we don't want to have, 1,000 coats though necessarily. So coats aren't necessarily the biggest thing. There are some specifications too, like we can't use every single type of blanket, right? Like if someone is crocheted a blanket, maybe we could use it at Shepherd's Gate, but we wouldn't use it in the emergency weather shelter at Greenville Rescue Mission, just because you need them to be things like kind of bioproof and stuff like that. And so we have to take those things into consideration. But if you do a drive for us, thank you so much. We would encourage you, before you were to do like a toy drive or a clothing drive, maybe to focus your attention on food drive first and foremost, if you could. But if you can't, we'll receive the others as well. We thank you for that.
What about if somebody wants to cook a meal in a shelter during Christmas?
Great question, Ryan. Cooking meals are, one, it's a great way to bless our guests. It's a tall order too, right? So like Greenville Rescue Mission, if full, can have 142 men in the Greenville Rescue Mission. And I can't remember a time in my working history here that it hasn't been full. Greenville Rescue Mission just stays full to the brim all the time. Well, that's 142 meals. So you may not have capacity for that. However, if you do, we'd love for you to come and serve there. There are some requirements, though, for cooking and serving meals inside of Rescue Mission. So all of our kitchens are DHEC kitchens, DHEC inspected, right? So they have to be like a restaurant kitchen. And so we're also required that the meals that we serve out of there are made in an inspected kitchen or a commercial kitchen as well. So if you wanted to do that, we encourage you to reach out to our volunteer administrator, reach out to Caleb, reach out directly to the shelter, and they can advise you on what to do. But you could cook a meal at your church, technically, if your church had such a kitchen.
Yep.
And then bring it. But what we try to discourage people from doing is doing like, we cook this in, Sally's kitchen, and then bringing it, and we had to figure out what to do with it at that point.
Yeah, maybe just don't tell us. I'm just kidding.
The CEO just said that.
Let's cook them in commercial kitchens to the best of our ability. But hey, let's take it a step further. So cooking a meal is a great thing, right? It's a way of serving others.
Yeah.
Sharing a meal is kind of the next step, right? Like, so if I had a magic wand, all the groups that came in to cook meals, they would cook the meal on site with our guests, like building relationship. Then they would sit down in the dining hall or dining room, whatever we have in that facility, and share the meal with our guests, engaging in relationship plus some delicious food, whatever it is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think going back to people being lonely, like, and when we say spending time with people, especially for a believer, sometimes I think you can be tempted to be like, oh, I just got to share the gospel with this guy every minute. I got to just, when a lot of those guys are believers who come in there, or they recently found Christ. They don't necessarily need you to, quote, fix them. They just want somebody to love them first. And we're working on the helping them out and lifting them up. But you can be a part of that too, just by spending time with somebody. I remember I watched one of our stories of rescue recently, a guy named Charlie. And Charlie talked about that. He said as an Overcomer grad, he was going to his mentor's home and he thought, oh, I'm going at Thanksgiving. And he didn't want everybody to be focusing on fixing him, the Overcomer guy.
Yeah.
He just wanted to spend time with people. And so that's, to your point, cook a meal, serve it, sit out there and just love on people.
Yeah, I mean, our Miracle Hill's whole ministry is built on this idea of building relationships, getting to know someone. And so certainly we see that at Christmas with opportunities like cooking meals and sharing meals with somebody. But we really want people to develop relationships year round so that when they come in at Christmas time, that there's already an established relationship, right? So what does that look like throughout the year?
Yeah, it looks like a variety of things. And what I would do is I would encourage people to check out our volunteer page, because there are year-round volunteer opportunities. And I'm sure we'll put that in the description. I'll say it for just the listeners, though. miraclehill.org/volunteer. It's a force of habit, Ryan, I have to say.
Yes, no, it's great. Do your job.
But there are opportunities like, I'll give you one. There's something called Coffee Time at the Greenville Rescue Mission, where it's optional. Like, our guests don't have to attend it. But guys are getting up early, and they're going to have coffee with some volunteers, and they'll hear a little devotional down there, and they drink some coffee, and they literally just get to spend time with people. And that's a volunteer opportunity. Think about that. If you're retired, or even if you're not retired, if you got time early in the morning, you can go down to the Greenville Rescue Mission. You could go have a cup of coffee with a guy who's experiencing homelessness, who's not anymore, right? Like, he's housed in our facility for now. We're working on getting him transitioned out, but he can spend time with you. You just loving on them. and being the hands and feet of Jesus with that individual. So great opportunity year round.
Okay, so we've talked about time, we've talked about talents. What about treasures? How important are financial gifts during Christmas?
I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but that there's a flux of all things, right? There's a flux of canned food drives. There's a flux of giving. In fact, December can account, just that 1 month can account for like 1/5 of the giving for the entire year, which is amazing, right? Mm-hmm. But depending on the economy and stuff like that, sometimes giving can or cannot be funky around the holiday season, and we lean in, we rely so much on that big chunk of funding. So I would encourage people, make a gift, make a financial gift to Miracle Hill. Maybe even make it a family tradition where you sit down with your kids and you explain to them what we're doing, who we serve, and how we want to serve. You want to serve them as well, but you can make a financial contribution to the ministry. And we encourage you to do that before December 31st at midnight. Sometimes people will mail things in and they try to mail it, on the 29th or the 30th. We are legally required to go by the postmark date. So if we get a check from you that says December 31st on it, but it says it wasn't processed by the post office until January 4th, then unfortunately we have to mark that as a January gift for the next year. But there are tax implications for that. But there are also very creative ways for you to give too. Some things that are non-cash gifts, things like IRA distributions, your required minimum distribution if you're 72 years or older, that you can actually give and get tax benefits by giving directly to a nonprofit out of your IRA. Some of you do that already. We've actually seen a huge increase in that over the past 5 years. People giving out of their IRAs, those qualified charitable distributions. You can give stock. You can leave Miracle Hill in your will. We actually have this really cool will tool. If you don't have a will, it's called Free Will, and you can go onto our legacy giving page and you can select Make a Will, and it'll ask you. Here's the catch. It'll say, would you like to leave any nonprofits in your will? And you could say no, I don't want to leave Miracle Hill in there, but it'll ask if you'd like to leave Miracle Hill in your will. But we would be so appreciative if you thought of us. Many of the folks who end up leaving Miracle Hill in their will, leaving an estate, are individuals who have given small amounts every month over time. Lamplighters, right? We talk about lamplighters are our sustaining donors. Those are our monthly donors. And Miracle Hill has over 700 sustaining donors. That means every single month that person's given. And it might be $5 from a widow's mite giver. It might be $1,500. But they're both lamplighters. And so a lot of times lamplighters will end up being the ones to leave Miracle Hill in their will, and sometimes people just don't even think about it. You may be 40 years old, but it's a good idea to have a will. So if you'd like to use that Free Will tool for simple wills, it's easy to use, and you could call me and I could help you with the tool. So you can give like that. There are several different ways to give. A lot of people will give through donor advised funds. South Carolina Christian Foundation does a lot with us, or the National Christian Foundation. You can creatively give and get better tax benefits out of it.
Okay, kind of the last bucket to consider, what does Christmas look like for our staff? Clearly, I already pointed to the fact that some of them are still working on Christmas Day, but how are they celebrating Jesus during the Christmas holiday?
Yeah, so each staff, like each facility, and when I say each facility, I'm really talking about 8 thrift stores, 4 rescue missions, 2 recovery facilities, our food warehouse, like it's big, right? They each have their own little budget to appreciate their staff, and oftentimes that looks like a Christmas party, so they'll each do a little Christmas party. I remember 10 years ago, I was the thrift store manager at our Greer thrift store, and our group chose to come in on a Sunday, and we had a lady who was part-time with us. She was also part-time at the Olive Garden, and she hooked us up. We had an Olive Garden Christmas spread. We had breadsticks. It was flowing. But we all do our own little things. But we also do some bigger staff Christmas things. A couple of exciting things. I can just talk about what we did this past year. We do this thing called Christmas at the Hill. And for years and years and years, the staff of Miracle Hill would kind of gather up there for different events. Up at our children's home is what I'm talking about. And that's where we get our name from. That is the Miracle Hill. And as we've gotten bigger, that kind of waned a little bit just because that's complicated to get that many staff out there to the children's home. But we offer it again, and I believe we're going to continue to offer that, we did this thing called what was it? Oh, Come Let Us Adore Him or something like that up on the hill. It was Christmas on the Hill this past Christmas, and it was on a Friday evening, and we even shut our thrift stores down a little bit early so that staff could make it up there. But we had over 100 staff and their families come out and just enjoy some caroling. The ministry provided a meal for their families. I think we did hot dogs and some other things like that. And we made s'mores and had live music, and people could take their pictures up there by the old fireplace. There's this beautiful picnic shelter up at our children's home. And it was just fun. We had the Christmas lights flowing and the decorations flowing. Just an opportunity for our staff to intermingle. I mentioned I've got lots of little boys, and my wife is precious, and I want people to know who my family is outside of just me here at work. So it's a great way for us to get to know each other's families and intermingle some. So that was one big thing. I thought it was a blast. But
I did too. All the kids were out there playing football.
That's right.
In the pitch black dark with glow-in-the-dark necklaces.
That's right. That's
man,
right.
It was a blast.
We had these glow-in-the-dark little peppermint stripe necklace things and hot cocoa bar. It was so good. But we want our families to intermingle. I think the best teams should demonstrate to each other that they care about each other outside of the workplace. And as a ministry who values our families, we certainly do that. Another big thing that we did was participating in the Greenville Christmas Parade this year. So, we have a new history wall here at the admin office. If you ever come here and take a tour, we'd love to show you the history wall. But in the process of putting up photos and stuff on our history wall and searching through the archives, I think Ryan stumbled across a photo of us. You or Susan or somebody stumbled across a photo of us participating in the Pickens or some Pumpkin Town or something Christmas parade in the 50s, late 50s. And so it was cool to kind of bring that back to life. It's my understanding that Miracle Hill used to participate in the Christmas parades, and we brought that back to life in full force this past Christmas. And we hope to do it again this Christmas. We might have a little bit of a different theme, but we had an illuminated nativity. And in fact, we probably have about 50 of our staff were either marching in the parade or riding on a float in the parade. And it was this really cool nativity scene that you actually hand-built the stable, right, on the back of the float. And one of my favorite features was we have a guy here named Jason who is just a master guitarist. And Jason was dressed as the angel Gabriel, standing in the back of the pickup on all white, and he has white hair too, which was kind of cool. And he was just playing these beautiful Christmas carols and stuff in front of the nativity as we're driving through the middle of downtown Greenville. And it was so cool to just put Jesus on full display right in the middle of downtown. I know you had a good time.
It was epic. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely epic. So those things happened, and they'll continue to happen, Lord willing. And I think that's it as far as our staff goes. If I were to say one more thing, can I say one more thing?
Say anything you want.
I'm not going to tell a long story or anything like that, but I do want you guys, we've talked about our guests and just the loneliness that accompanies sometimes this Christmas season, and how we have staff that are working with them on Christmas Day. Oftentimes in our new employee orientation, I'll tell this story about when I was a boy and my dad found me in the woods one day in the darkness. It's a real story. But my dad had a condition. He's blind. And so my dad had no night vision. And so I remember when he found me that day, we were camping. It was a big, long story. But he found me that day, and he scooped me up into his arms and had to carry me to a bathhouse. And anyway, he brought me back into this cabin we were staying in, and just kind of spared me from a lot of embarrassment and shame. And I'll tell that story, and then I'll segue it into talking about the Greenville Rescue Mission. If you go to the gymnasium today, if you were to stay in our cold weather shelter there, the cold weather shelter, you stay on these really nice big mats, but there's a big bold words up on the top of the gymnasium. It says, "You are loved." And I'll tell that story, and then I'll talk about how there are some people who will stay at a Miracle Hill facility tonight who have never heard that there is a Father who loves them, who's calling out their name in the darkness. And that breaks my heart, but it's also like, what a privilege for us to be able to be the ones who, for the first time, someone's broken, ashamed, afraid, hopeless. They've given up hope. They come into Miracle Hill, and they're maybe staying with us on Christmas morning, or staying with us on Thanksgiving Day, and they're going to know by the time they leave there, you are loved. I mean, we're going to tell them. We're going to tell them that we love them. We're going to tell them there's a God who loves them. But I just want to encourage people to think of us this Christmas season. You know, when you pray, I wish that you would pray for the 600 plus men, women, and children that call this place home. When you teach your children to pray, I wish that you would teach them to pray every single day. You know, this is 86 years of ministry. Is that right, Ryan? For Miracle Hill?
Correct.
For 86 years, right here in your neighborhood and in our hometowns, Miracle Hill has been this beacon of hope and gospel light in a community that there are a lot of hurting people. And so for 86 years, people have been praying for the guests at Miracle Hill. And so I just want to encourage you guys, pray for our guests and see how you can be involved. Like, what a privilege it is to be just a light in the darkness. In fact, that's what our Lamplighter program is named after. Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before men so they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. That's what we want to do here, and that's what you guys allow us to do here.
Yeah, and as they're praying for us, they should know that we pray for them, right?
Every day.
We pray that the Lord would bless our volunteers and our donors and the people that come alongside us, and that would include the people listening to this podcast. So thank you all this Christmas for being part of the solution and part of the story of Miracle Hill. Even if all you do is listen to this podcast, you're part of God's story here. So on that, I think I'll just close this in prayer, and then you're going to sing 5 songs.
I'm not going to sing
Christmas.
any songs. I'm not going to sing any songs. I just want to say 2 words. 2 words. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Let's pray. Jesus, we love you. Lord, as we head into the day, this random day that we celebrate the birth of Christ, Father, help us to be so cemented in the understanding of who Jesus is that we don't just celebrate it one day, that we celebrate his birth, his death, and his resurrection every day of our lives. Lord, help us to see the amazing, unbelievable, extravagant gift that Jesus is this time of the year as well as throughout the year. Thank you for all of the listeners and donors and volunteers that come alongside Miracle Hill, Lord. Thank you for the staff who give wholly of themselves each day to your ministry, Lord, and thank you for the amazing gift of the guests, the adults and the children throughout Miracle Hill. Help all of us to see the value that they bring, the gift that they are to our lives as we get to interact with them. Teach us how to be Jesus to the people that we come in contact with, and bless us through the rest of this Christmas season. We love you and we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Goodbye, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Same.